Moving on to thinking a little bit now about the ops, right, of actually deploying software or a digital solution in what is a very operationally heavy setup. I think implementation of technology, especially frontier technology like the kind that you're talking about, is obviously like challenging, right? It touches a lot of different parts of the system. It involves a lot of moving parts, right? And as you said, there are not just the decision makers, but then when you're implementing solutions, you have to also work with the stakeholders on the ground to drive adoption, all of these things, right? Could you give us a little bit of a sense of how you approach this whole context of implementing a solution, right? Like from the perspective of the infrastructure, from the perspective of the stakeholders you have to work with, from the perspective of say technology transfer, training that has to happen to allow what you have deployed in the facility to run seamlessly over time, right? And also we are hearing this context in a lot of the AI startups that we're looking at in terms of say time to value, right, being very very fast. Because I think while it is clear to people that AI is doing a lot of interesting stuff and it will potentially add a lot of value, of course there is resistance, there is skepticism that exists in pockets, and often people don't believe it until they see like a quick win sort of getting delivered, right, in some shape and form. So just want to understand, how are you seeing this happen, and specifically also how are y'all approaching this yourselves at Physical AI?
Yeah, so I think the starting point of that is any such rollout has to have a pilot approach. Nobody will come and give you a big chunk of their operations and saying, okay, please transform for me. Be ready for it, right? Be ready. The solution that you build, how modular it is, so that more often than not, your pilot approach is what will work, at least for the first few quarters, if not more, right? Depending on how fast it gets accepted. So I think that insight you have to be well aware of. And as I mentioned earlier in the chat, right, this was one thing that we were clear of, that if whatever solution that we have, how close to a plug and play that you can build, that's your differentiation. Because people, first of all, will not give you a big chunk of their operations to start with. And secondly, if you are replacing something, they will not let go of that before they get confidence in you. So you have to be rest assured of both these two facts. These are facts on the ground. Now, how have you built your environment? How are you architected to do and gradually expand? And that's your ARR increase strategy and all of that. Plus, how do you operate in parallel to existing solutions and then slowly and gradually move into the customer environment? I think that's been our journey. So what we are trying to do, right, as part of our journey is do pilots with our design partners as much as possible, build out solutions. So we've gone, understood their needs, gone deep into that solution, and it's good to spend a little extra time on that. Yes, we all have this tendency to let's do go and do something there, right? But more often than not, it's okay to spend maybe a month more or a week more, depending on where you are, just thinking slightly more as to is how is this going to move forward in this customer. If I do this one pilot, small pilot here, if I have to expand in that same location and cover the entire location or multiple locations, how am I set up for that? Right? I find, and this has been one of the feedbacks in a lot of the discussions that I've had, that people have struggled there. Yes, one pilot goes successful. The kind of effort that has been put in into that first pilot, people don't want to multiply it if you have to do 10 such things, right? They want to be at least at 5 or 10% of that should be covering my entire location. I think that's been the crux of it. And that's where the hardware enabler piece, right? What we are calling adapter at our end, what we want to build as an adapter, our focus has is that how do we enable this close to a plug and play solution, right? And that's what our endeavor is towards.
Understood. And one other question that I also had was, given that while the eventual goal is for software to become like, let's say for your 100 factory, it'll probably be very very seamless, right? Maybe you get to a place where the IT team is able to download a software solution. It plugs into existing hardware in a way. I'm imagining the end state of how this might look like, right? But today, as you said, there'll be variability, there'll be complexity, etc. Are you also then thinking about the team that you deploy on the ground, the people who you have in the different roles? That despite being essentially an AI software company, there are ops folks on the ground who you need to also have to be able to execute this, right? Like with Palantir and a lot of companies, we're seeing this whole concept of the forward deployed engineer that, hey,
Yeah.
it's not going to be like traditional SaaS where we give you a tool, you download it, and then you continue to work with it. It is necessary to handhold customers on the ground. It is necessary to interface with people who are going to use the solution, to train them, to educate them on how the whole thing works, right? So I was just curious to understand how you think about the resourcing and staffing requirements in this paradigm.
Yeah, so frankly, Rohit, there are some thoughts there. Time will answer that question very, very specifically, but I'll tell you what the initial thoughts are,
Yes.
right? Maybe to some extent, we are at a position or slightly advantageous position that, say, for example, I'm sitting here and I'm building it out for the US market or India market. There is an on-ground channel that exists already, which is doing this stuff to some
I
extent.
see.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't use the word engineers, but say in India, these are called system integrators. In the developed market, they are called managed service providers. So
Right.
they
Right.
would
Yes.
they would typically go, and they are the guys who are installing cameras and is in sensors and trying to help some of these customers today already. So they are already on the ground.
Right. Right.
So that was, and I didn't mention it earlier, that's one additional input into the framework,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
right? Which helped us say that, okay, this is how we operate. Does that mean that I don't have a final answer as to if this model were to evolve 5 years down the line, what kind of resourcing I will have on the ground? I still don't know. But the starting point, there is a support mechanism already that exists. But
Understood.
having said that, that support mechanism doesn't include, especially in the Indian ecosystem, doesn't include high-end resources. These are
Right.
guys who very well understand the context of the customer on the ground, and they understand the hardware ecosystem. So just imagine a very, very evolved electrician. So just to visualize in your head, right? That guy is that. Now, he's not a software guy, but you can train those guys to deploy softwares and make it operational. But if there is a bug on the ground, you can't expect that
Of
guy to
course.
come and solve for it. Now
Of course.
that's a balance that we need to do, right? And that's how, and that again is a question on the product that you're building as to how well you're able to do it, how much would be remote versus on ground. I still feel in a product like this, there would be an on ground kind of a support, but whether it's 20-80, 50-50, or 80-20, I think that over time,
Sure.
the kind of use
Sure.
cases you gravitate towards, the kind of customers, I think that would
Understood.
decide at that point in time.
Understood. And one of the last questions that I had on this element is you spoke about pilots, you spoke about design partners. I think it's become very clear, right? Like that, especially with frontier tech, it's important to have an early believer, an early adopter, and an example, right, of a high stature that you can point to your next 10 customers and say, if X is doing it, how can you not, right? In some shape or form. Would love to understand, how do you go about one identifying a design partner who you would like to work with? Because I think that's an important challenge that most startups are trying to solve in the early part, especially if they're building something new, and not common in the AI software space. I think like voice AI, for example, everyone's now aware what it is, and it's different. But what you're building is significantly more complex. It's much newer and nicher in some ways, compared to, say, very common solutions that have become part and parcel, right? So especially in this context, how do you figure out, who your design partner should be? And I think another one that's very interesting is, how do you get them to become a design partner, right? Like, I'm sure any top manufacturing company today is getting approached by dozens of different players saying, hey, we have solution X, we have solution Y. They all want this large company to be a design partner or a pilot partner. And sure, the company is not going to work with just one. They're going to work with a few, but they're not going to work with all 100 people who approach them, right? So wanting to also understand that in some ways, the design partnership is also the first sell of the concept that you make in some ways. So just wanting to know how one should go
Yeah,
about this.
no, understood. So I think lots of questions there. So let me start with the design partner choice, right?
Yes.
It also depends on the founders. As I said, your first few design partners are network referral, 100%. Now, uh, I get it that, say, for example, I come with 20 years of experience, my co-founders come with similar experience. So you come in with a lot of network, right? And you deploy that to get your design partners in. Now, there may be a lot of young founders. Now, that's when those young founders need to reach out even at an initial stage. And this is based on my chats with some of them as to how you build a support advisory ecosystem, even at an initial stage. And these could be just well-wishers, right? Who are working with you and helping you in building out that. And maybe you leverage their network. So frankly, I didn't have that problem. Yes, I'm still, obviously, I don't have 100 customers. We have a few design partners, but I've still not uh, dipped into my entire network, right? That's the fact of life. And sorry, what was your original question? Just trying to remember.
So I think one was how you select the design partner. Second
Oh,
is how do you get them to agree? Because what I
okay.
was saying, because
Yeah.
what you were just saying, right? Like even for the younger founders, you have this network of people who you want as advisors, well-wishers. There's a degree of evangelism that needs to happen, right? You need to get people at the very early onset to believe in the concept, to be willing to give you a shot at, say, okay, come spend 3 months testing this, trying this at my factory, let's build it out together, and so on and so forth, right? There's also this context at times, and I've seen it in some of the places earlier in my career where I worked at, people are also very protective, right, of technology. So the idea that, hey, you will come, you will build something with me, and then 10 of my competitors are also going to have a similar solution in the future, it's difficult, right, for people to wrap their heads around. So just wanted to figure out, what are some of these dynamics that you have to
Yeah. Okay.
navigate
Fair point. Fair
to
point.
implement, and how do you go about it?
So first and foremost, let me debunk this idea again, right? I'm sure all of us know. Ideas are mean nothing, right? So please, you can think in your own head, sitting in your own house, in your room, thinking that, boss, I have the idea to change the world. That has no value. So that's point number one. Uh, Execution is key. Okay, that's the most important. Second, uh, like I'll give you an example of what younger people who worked with me, so they were in my team and now they are founders. They reach out to me. Now you will never go and advise someone you don't know, right? Because you don't know, to sorry to use the word, shit about them, right? You don't know what you'll get into. So you will advise people that you know.
Right,
So
right.
if your prior boss or maybe colleague or stakeholder whom you know or you worked with, right, reach out to them. It's okay, right? Share your idea openly. And that's, for me, the biggest sticking point I've seen is people somehow feel that if I share my idea,
Right, right.
in a week's time 10 such startups will spring up, which I don't know, I understand how that happens, right? But still, so please speak to as many people. You'll be surprised the value that you get more than what you dissipate or you lose, right? So that's point number one. Use your network. It could be your earlier colleagues, all of them. Just reach out and try and build that network out, right? For that, you may have to pitch to them. Use it as a building block or a mock pitch, right? That you might do to investors later. It always helps. I have done it. I have made hundreds of thousands of presentations, but still, when I reached out to my network, I used that as a mock.
Right.
Point number one. Your first question: who should your design partner be? Now, as I mentioned, the framework of choosing manufacturing, choosing use case, and in for that use case, understand which is that sector where the use case will be more predominant
Right, right.
in manufacturing. Right now, in that, you have your framework as to who your ideal design partner should be. Now, the fact of life is you don't have that choice. You are limited by your network, as I said, because that's your only way for design partners. So you have, but that doesn't mean you don't have a point of view of who your ICP is or your ideal design partner is. You have that, list down the companies, then you go into your network and see, okay, which are the companies that you can reach out to?
Sure, sure,
Which
sure.
one, which few, which would come closest to those?
Right.
That's what you choose. It's not rocket science. Have your ideal design partner, have your list of network referral where you can reach out to. In that, who is closest, then in decreasing order of priority, reach out to them. That's a simple task, right? The only thing I would say is that you may have an ideal TG. You'll be surprised at how often these ideal TGs change. So
Sure,
when
sure.
you're choosing your design partners, don't be very rigid. Say, for example, if I say manufacturing, in manufacturing, with some framework and some decision tree, I say, okay, 1,000 to 2,000 crore steel conversion factory owners are my ideal TG, right? That's
Okay,
fine. So
okay.
assume that's my framework and that's the output. In my network, I also have 5 such companies who fit that bill. But it is not prudent to do that. In your initial discussions, just expand this list of ideal TGs, right? Because you'll be surprised again as to what you have thought in your head sitting in a room versus what the world is out there. So have option 1, 2, 3 TGs when you're reaching out in your network. Try and expand that list, right? Reach out to
Right.
multiple such TGs. So, like for example, if 1,000 to 2,000 crore steel garment was number 2 and food was number 3. So if I had already 5 design partners and my bandwidth was allowing me only to do 5, and I had 5 steel guys, I would not speak to all those 5. I will speak to only 2 out of those or 3 out of those. I will choose one each in garment and food
Right.
to expand, because if your vision is to create a slightly more horizontal product, if you speak to only the steel guys, point number 1, you may end up going in a very narrow direction. Tomorrow your ability to broad base would be limited. Now,
I understand.
and point number 2, if you have that narrow vision of steel, but you go and speak to them and you realize it's not working out, then your time, and if say time is of essence, etc., you may lose those 3, 4, 5 months for that entire discussion to happen. So have those option 2 and 3 discussions live. It will help
Right.
you tap into it, in addition to giving you that additional insights for a more better least common denominator.
Understood. Understood. And the second part of what I asked, which was, how do you get someone to agree to be a design partner? How do you close the first sale to a design partner? Would love to understand what your experience
Yeah,
has
so
been
I think,
like and what you're
yeah.
hearing as well.
So again, not rocket science. Yeah, you have to be. The simplest thing is to be completely honest about it, right? Saying that, hey, if depend on which stage of your build you are, right? Say worst case scenario, hey, I'm pre-product, I'm building it out, I am, but this is my intent. This is what we want to build out. You should have that clarity of thought so that you cannot give a vague 80,000 feet view that, okay, this is what I'm building and expect him to agree. Even if he's your
Right,
friend on
right.
network, then you are losing credibility there. You should be able to build out, even if you're pre-product, you should say that this is the exact thing that I would do. Yes, it may be you may have a tolerance level of 20% here and there, but this is what I'm looking to do. Number 2, you are my design partner. Please, and he should say yes only if he's interested in that. Otherwise, it's a lose-lose, right? Otherwise, you will get the wrong product inputs and he will not have the necessary investment of time and resources to make it work. But if that problem statement is live for him, this is what I want to do. I will build out this product. You are my initial design partner. The initial, say, setup costs, again, it depends on negotiations, your ability to invest, runway, all of that. But I will take up these costs initially. Eventually, once this product becomes live, you as my initial design partner would have a 80% pricing discount for the next 3 years, right? Till my next
Right,
version comes out. Now, this
right.
don't leave things to judgment or leave it. Don't make things subjective. Be objective. People appreciate it because then they are also running businesses and they are also running against time. They also don't like vagueness, right? So be specific.
Right.
I am pre-product. This is what I'm building. This is my final end state. This is my broad roadmap: 6 month, 1 year, 2 years. If I partner with you in 2 years, I'll be able to potentially transform the way you operate. These are the benefits that you will get. But in that, these are your investments in terms of time, resources, etc. This is the kind of governance mechanism we want to run so that
Right.
the right product gets delivered. These are the cost implications for you. I cannot take all the costs. Sorry, I am too small for that. But Are you willing to make this kind of an investment? It cannot be humongous. So you have to balance that out. But this is how typically a good conversation might go.